Hey, everybody.
Hey.
So supposedly Google purged all of the meeting room acceptances, start the new year off. I couldn't find a single meeting room free for 10 a.m. on a Monday. That's so weird. Give us, wow. I feel like the sun just turned on for you, Stephen.
That's kind of how I feel too.
Cool. So we appear to be recording. I don't know who started that, or maybe this is set up to auto record. So I should probably go ahead and give the disclaimer that you're being recorded, and this will eventually be posted to YouTube publicly. So please keep in mind that we have a code of conduct here at the, where are we again? Right, Kubernetes 114 release team meeting. This is technically, in my head, week 1, but I'm still kind of feeling like it's week 0, given the number of people that have said that they're still kind of getting back from vacation or still out on vacation, things of that nature. So let me go ahead, pull up the chat, find the meeting notes. Right up front, I apologize for how last minute this meeting invite was. Kind of spent the weekend writing things, but forgetting to actually schedule things. So that should, if I've done things right, take you to the meeting minutes, and I see other people's cursors floating around on it, so I think that worked. If you can go ahead and add your name to the attendees list for those of you who are here, and if you have a position, putting it there would also be cool. I figure since we are back from break, but it's kind of slow, I know traditionally the first kickoff meeting, everybody kind of goes around and introduces themselves. I figure we can do a much longer version of that next week when we have a fuller roster. But we could just take a couple minutes now for folks who are here. If you're on the 114 release team, yeah, okay, fine. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Who are you? What role? What company? What time zone? So, hi, I'm Aaron of Sigbeard. I'm your release lead. I work for Google, and I am in the Pacific time zone. I'm going to hand off to Hans, because on my screen, he's on the top left.
Hello, I'm Hannes. I am the release branch manager for this release. Was Shadow for the last 2 or 3 releases. I work for Pivotal, and I am based in London.
Stephen, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Stephen Augustus. I am the sig-release chair, and I'm just hanging out, seeing what's going on. So, hey.
Cool. Dave?
Yeah, my name's Dave Strable. I'm the release notes lead. I'm in Central Time Zone out of Minneapolis and work for Microsoft.
Rock on. Jeffrey.
I don't actually have a position, but hi, my name's Jeffrey Sika. I work for the University of Michigan, and I was looking to shadow release notes. So, hello.
Hi, Nikita. How are you doing?
Hi. I don't have a position on the release team either, but hi everyone, I'm Nikita. I work for a company called Dudza, and I am looking to shadow patch release management, and I'm based in India.
Okay. Marco.
Oh, hello everyone. I am Marco. I currently doesn't have any position in sig-release, but I have applied to shadow patch release management and batch manager this release. I work for a company called Lucy, and I'm based in Belgrade, Serbia.
You have fun lights behind you. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Morten?
Hey, I think I'll be a CI signal shadow. I work for Google and I'm in the Pacific time zone.
Hey, Ben, how you doing?
Hi, I'm Benjamin Elder. Google is my corporate overlord. I will be shadowing the release lead, and I'm in sig-release, sig-testing, sig-beard, all the SIGs.
Ken? Kenny. I keep forgetting. We call you Kenny.
I'm in Pacific time zone, sorry.
Okay.
How's it going, everyone? Kenny Coleman. I'll be kind of doing a little bit of sitting back, kind of watching this as it goes along. I'd like to kind of be in Aaron's position here in a 2 or 3 releases. We'll see kind of what happens, but just want to introduce myself. I was the enhancements lead in 113. I'll also be helping the enhancements team in 114 too, just to kind of give a little bit of oversight onto how the process works.
Cool. My other right-hand man, Mike Arpaia.
Hey y'all, how's it going? My name's Mike. I have been on the release team for the past 3 releases doing release notes, and this release I'm going to be shadowing Aaron and helping him with all the things.
All of them. Mayank, or Mayank's iPhone.
Hi, my name is Mayank. I'm a contributor in SigAuth and SigApps for some features. I have a few features that I wanted to get to beta, and I was just hanging out, seeing what the process looks like, and getting a feel for what the release process works, how it works.
Awesome. Really glad to hear that. Alexandra, am I pronouncing that right? I see you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. Still not hearing anything. I think if you want to type something into chat, we can read it off. Let's go ahead and move on to Aish. Who is this strange Aish person? I've never heard of them before. Also can't hear anything from you, Aish. No. Okay. Oh, I hear a click. Now I'm hearing noises.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, I'm Aish Sundar. I was the 113 release lead. Just hanging out, just seeing how 114 goes along. Nothing much. I miss you guys, so came back online. That's it. Happy to help if needed anytime. Let me know.
I have lots of questions. Natasha, it's good to see you.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be back. So I'm Natasha Woods, and I will be heading communications marketing for this release. And I have previously done this for 0.8, 0.9, and 10, and then I went on maternity leave. So now I'm back, and I'm very excited. And CNCF, the Linux Foundation, pays my bills.
Cool. What time zone are you in?
Oh, sorry, Pacific. I'm in the East Bay area.
Gotcha. Nicholas.
Hey, I'm Nicholas Lane. I don't have a position yet for release team, but I've applied for bug triage and communications, I think. VMware pays my bills, and I'm in the Pacific time zone.
Cool. Tim Pepper, another total stranger.
I'm Tim Pepper of sig-release, sig-contribx, and I think we need a sig-tim. There's so many Tims. sig-tim. I work for VMware, I'm Pacific time zone, and along with Alexandra, who is having mic issues, am patch release co-manager for 113, and we are looking to bring that into more of a team effort moving forward in a sustaining way instead of one individual owning patch release for a given release branch for 9 months at a time. So that's what our goal is for 114, to be patch release management team.
Excellent. And finally, Hart, introduce yourself.
Hey there, I'm Hart Hoover. I work for Hefty VMware, and I do not have a position yet on sig-release, but I volunteered to shadow Natasha on the comms team. So happy to help out and join. I'm in the U.S. Central Time Zone.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear we have a great diversity of time zone and diversity of employers and diversity in generals. And hi, Alexandra. We're super excited to have you cooperating with Tim on the patch release management team for 113 in Central. So, number of you have said you are not on the release team and you would like to shadow things. At this point, I kind of want to kick it over to Stephen to talk about this questionnaire I think that you were going to put together. Oh, CET, Central European, got you, sorry. That's even better for patch release. Okay. Stephen, do you want to talk a little bit about this shadow questionnaire that I think you and Josh had been working on?
Yeah, sure. So this time around, we decided that we were getting a lot of basically the way that release team HR works is I put up a PR for the release and people sign up for that, and then I kind of calculate all the people who have signed up and the companies that they work for and who signed up when, and we kind of determine shadows based on that. We decided this time around that we want to, since shadowing is supposed to be kind of like a mentor-mentee relationship, we want to make sure that one, there are not too many shadows for a role lead to handle, and two, that the shadows and the role lead actually align in terms of like what they're trying to accomplish in the role, as well as time zones and different things like that, to make sure that there's coverage. So I'm working on a questionnaire with a lot of questions that Josh Burke has provided, as well as some of the former release team role leads. So kind of firming that up and churning through the holiday backlog, that will be out this week. The expectation is that anyone who is interested in shadowing for this release fills out that survey. Anyone who does not do that will not be considered. I will post that on the volunteer issue that's in sig-release right now, as well as on KDev when that's ready. So I am hoping to get it out by Tuesday, but again, churning through some backlog. But 100% this week, we'll get that done. So.
Do you feel like it's realistic for us to have shadows locked in and chosen by Friday if you're going to get that questionnaire out by Tuesday?
So that will, collating the survey answers as well as having the release role leads kind of interview the shadows. I'm not sure that that's realistic. I think that maybe we can move forward with a few shadows, or people can add people can add their shadows to their roles as they see fit, and kind of interview as they see fit. But we have all of the leads locked in, so I think it's fine to roll with that in the meantime.
Okay. I guess I can follow up offline, but I will certainly say from my perspective, I'm looking to each of the different roles to staff their shadows up however they best see fit. For people who are looking to shadow the release, I would go talk to those individual role leads as documented. And the release team link in the meeting notes, I can also paste it in chat here. Because for me, it's about, you might be surprised what the time expectations are to formally staff some of these roles. So shadowing will give you a really good chance to kind of shoulder surf and be mentored to get a better view for how things work. It also is a great opportunity to help improve a given position before you step into fulfilling that position. And also, we could pretty much use all the help we can get on the release. So just because your name doesn't have the word lead or shadow next to it does not mean you are unproductive human being who we're going to completely ignore. If you remember, for those of you who were at the Contributor Summit, we actually gave like a special award to Dims because he has showed up time and again at each and every release and done some incredible things to help push things forward. So we greatly appreciate any and all effort you want to put towards this. And I think we're going to be looking, we have a couple like big boulders that could use help regardless of whether or not you staff shadow. Things that come to mind would be trying to make KEPs work for us and deflaking Kubernetes end-to-end tests. So any thoughts or questions there before I move on?
So what's the time commitment required for the shadows, and can there be multiple shadows for a given role?
As we have it documented, I think you could sort of have up to 3 shadows per role. Again, I'm going to delegate to each of the people for their different roles because it kind of depends. Like I personally cannot handle 3 people shadowing the lead, so I have 2 shadows. Other people may feel like they want more. So I would figure out the roles that you're interested in and go talk to those folks. Okay, so in terms of next little bit of administrivia is the proposed schedule for the release. I will share my screen. Not that one, that one. Cool. So never mind the thing on the right. I'll just go ahead and then close that. That was me looking at all the release minutes for all the previous releases, trying to figure out how we do things around here. On the left here is a spreadsheet, because Lord knows I love spreadsheets. And this was my way of trying to visualize what the schedule is going to look like for 114. I kind of wanted to remain pretty uncontroversial and boring, much like what you have seen for any other release. It's the sort of thing where we end up releasing kind of towards the end of the quarter. There is about, let's see here, about 1.5 weeks from the start of the year for us to get our act together. So we're in that. The half week was last week. This is the full week. After we get our act together, we then have about 3.5 weeks. Is that right? To get KEPs landed. And after that, we have about 5 weeks from that point in time to actually land code. And then we have about anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks of code being slushed or frozen before we actually thaw the code, and then another week before we cut. I plan on pulling together putting this into a PR where we can have a more substantive discussion, but I've run this through sig-release chairs, former release leads, and my shadows, and nothing super crazy has come up out of this. Any questions there?
Aaron, I have one just in regards of KEPs, just as maybe this will help me to help Claire out when it comes time to start doing enhancement collection.
Mm-hmm.
Last time going through this, you know, we had the idea that we wanted to have a lot of the enhancements have some sort of KEP associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
However, it seemed like, I would say 75% or more probably didn't, because they were following the old process. And I didn't know of if any ones that are still old, if they need to actually go through the whole KEP process versus what was in the K community, or if those are going to follow, I guess, like a grandfather clause, where they're just, you know, they kind of make their way in no matter what, versus stuff that's net new that does require a KEP.
Okay, so all enhancement issues should always have some sort of design proposal or KEP attached to them. So design proposals are the old, KEPs are the new. This release moving forward, there's no grandfathering in. Every issue needs to have a KEP. Like, that is a hard rule. Every issue needs to have a KEP, or it's not going in the release.
What about stuff that's already, say, beta?
Must have a KEP.
Needs to have a KEP.
I'm just trying to clarify. Just trying to make sure.
Yeah.
That's
I'm gonna play devil's advocate for y'all, so that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah, no, there's going to be an email going out about that. I think Aaron sent out an initial one, but I'll send out something.
So what does every issue must have a KEP mean here?
So that's a really good question that I think we're still trying to hash out. But like, I need to, at a minimum, see a test plan and I need to see some consideration around upgrade downgrade. See, I see Hana's nodding his head there. I've been saying this repeatedly since before we even cut 113. I've said it at the Contributor Summit. I said it multiple times at KubeCon. People are nodding their heads. So we agree that that sounds great. How is this going to work? That's a good question, and I don't have concrete answers there. But considering that Stephen is basically the KEP guy, and KEPs are largely an architecture process, and the next SIG architecture meeting is this week, Thursday, I anticipate we'll have much better answers for you next week, or just as this conversation goes on. But like at a minimum, I would find a way to like go take a look at the KEP template and write up a KEP for your enhancement if you haven't done so already, and then just make sure there's something in there about testing and upgrade downgrade. But like that's my gut answer right now. Stephen, any comments on that?
Yeah, so in addition to upgrade testing, upgrade downgrade, I would like to see docs and an idea of what the docs are going to look like for the stage, as well as what the graduation criteria for the enhancement will be.
I think you meant every feature is an issue, right? So every feature issue must have a KEP.
Every enhancement issue must have a KEP.
Got it. Okay.
Yes. I was going to say, we live in a brave new world now where we don't talk about features anymore. We talk about enhancements because KEP stands for Kubernetes Enhancement Proposal. It seems kind of weird and silly to me because I keep thinking about them as features, but they're enhancements now.
So yeah, so the idea being that enhancements are multi-release scoped, whereas features are single release. Right? So if you're looking to bash something out within the scope of one release, that's a feature. If you're looking to do something like seccomp or something like, I don't know, HPA, right? That is an enhancement, right? It's going to take multiple releases to get done. So.
One thing that we did see in 113 that helped, again, Aaron, at the risk of adding more work for you and Claire, is actually going to the individual SIGs and then driving what the main points that we want. Like, for example, if we want all of them to follow KEPs, talking to them beforehand kind of helped us sell things a lot last time. So just FYI.
Yeah, I agree completely. I'm hoping that we can get some kind of plan together this week and start that march next week. So we've sort of jumped ahead, thanks, Kenny, to the everything must have a KEP section in the open discussion portion of the meeting notes. So my straw man is basically, yeah, every tracking issue has to have a KEP associated with that, and that KEP must at least have a test plan and upgrade downgrade. Those are my asks. I completely agree that things like docs and a checklist for alpha to beta or beta to stable graduation criteria are also really, really great things. That latter thing is actually, that checklist is really what I want, and I kind of want test plans and upgrade downgrade and docs to all be part of that checklist. But those first two things are the ones that are really, really big for me.
Yeah, so something that I don't think we can or should get into here is the idea that we don't have a global, I'm just mentioning this so that people are aware, we don't have the idea of a global graduation criteria for all Kubernetes projects, right? So in introducing enhancements, people don't provide this because I think partially because there's no baseline to kind of compare them against. So that's something that needs to change, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, there's some really bright individuals who have a long and storied history with the project and SIG architecture who have strong opinions on what it means for something to be alpha or beta or stable. I want for those individuals to get it written down, build consensus on that, and then we, the release team, are merely consumers of that checklist. So like I say in the meeting notes, SIG architecture provides the technical oversight for all of this, but our job should just be to verify that the checkboxes are checked. One possible idea to sort of help narrow the scope for this sort of effort, if that turns out to be a lot of work, is to suggest that we're not going to take any new features. Anything that is destined to land in alpha, we don't want it. We only want people to focus on work that involves graduating something from alpha to beta. or from beta to stable. And if that leaves some people with idle hands, we certainly could use some help on deflaking our end-to-end tests or hammering out what exactly all of those checklist criteria mean for the features we do want to take. I'm not entirely sure.
So is that a guideline that no alpha features will be allowed?
This is me thinking about that out loud.
The official answer is not yet.
But I'm talking about it early to give you a heads up for like where my head is at.
So I mean, do you mean from this release perspective only, or in general the guideline would become that no alpha features going in tree for the near future, I guess?
I think I'm only concerned with this release since I am the release lead for this release. I think it's a question for the broader community about what we mean when we talk about stability and quality for the project as a whole. I would hope we could get our act together where we feel like things are more stable and it's less of a painful process.
Sounds good.
Any more questions on the CAP thing? Okay, so my plan is to take a survey of all of the existing enhancements that are out there, just to get a feel for what is currently slated for the release, and so that I have more of an idea of what we're talking about substantively when we talk about this at SIG architecture. I know at a minimum, the largest boulder would be the boulder around Windows nodes and what it means for that level of support to go GA. That took up a lot of conversation in the 1.13 release cycle. It will continue to take a lot of conversation in the 1.14 release cycle. But I'm interested in seeing if it makes sense to focus first on some smaller, less tangled issues before using that as our guinea pig. Though ultimately that is going to be the largest boulder that I know of right now. Stepping backwards in the agenda real quickly, some administrivia. So I do need to actually schedule the rest of the meetings from here on out. The reason I scheduled this as a one-off is because I may end up using a different Zoom URI, just in the context of making sure that the meeting is set up as a recurring meeting, that anybody, that like my shadows can start if I'm not around, making sure that we're using host keys and just generally following the best practices laid forth by contributor experience when it comes to making sure it's a well-moderated meeting. So once I get that laid out, I will schedule the rest of the meetings and create some more wonderful bit.ly short links for all of that stuff. If you are a member of the 1.14 release team, you are hopefully subscribed to the Kubernetes milestone burn down Google group. That is generally the Google group that gets all of the tactical communication for coordination around the release, such as invites to this meeting and invites to all future burn down meetings, as well as discussion around things like letting in enhancements and things like that past the deadline. Also, we expect that any member of the release team is a member of the Kubernetes GitHub org. This allows them to /OK to test issues. This allows them to be assigned issues and use a number of other bot commands that are useful. And then finally, a little bit more specifically, once you are a member of the GitHub org, we'd like for you to become a member of the Kubernetes Milestone Maintainers team, although I want to hold off on that for just a little bit because I have a modest proposal that we completely purge that team's membership and start from scratch. Since it is the new year, it just seemed like new year, new team.
So I'm in favor of that, heavily in favor of that. We have wanted to clean this list for a while. It's fallen out of sync with there's a list that's in Kubernetes, which is not accurate anymore. This list is probably not accurate. I know Tim was working towards doing this a cycle and a half ago, maybe. But yeah, but I do think it's time. I know you've mentioned that on an issue already. So I'd like to move forward with it this week. I think I've okayed it, Tim's okayed it. we should just announce that we're going to do it and then get it done.
Okay. That's about all the administrivia that my handbook said that I had for this week. Any questions on that?
So I just want to note that for the people who are watching that are interested in shadowing, you had mentioned being a Kubernetes org member. For Shadow, it is not a strict requirement, although you should be working towards it. You should absolutely be working towards it in the scope of the release cycle. But don't think that that's a blocker for you actually shadowing. Just wanted to note that for people who are new to the process.
So the only other large things as I'm looking out for the next quarter are to consider what it is that we're going to do differently. The discussion around everything must have a cap, there is no such thing as grandfathering, yada, 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 is the largest one for me. But I know we talked about a number of things at the 113 retro, which we didn't actually get a chance to walk all the way through down to action items. We could, if you would like, use the following 30 minutes to walk through the rest of the 113 retro and drill into action items that we want to carry forward into the release. We could just kind of have an open discussion about what you want to do differently for this release. I put down a couple different suggestions from my head, but just to make sure that I don't fall into the anti-pattern of monologuing for every release team meeting, I kind of want to hear from other folks here about how they would like to best use the next 30 minutes thinking about how to make this release go better than the last release.
So I would like to, if we're doing part 3 of the retro, I'd like to hold it for a sig release meeting as opposed to this one, since this one was kind of last minute, just to make sure everyone's involved.
Do we have one tomorrow?
Tim, I think we do.
No, we do not. Unless you've moved back to weekly meetings, it's big releases.
No, it's a week after. Yeah, it's a week after. Yeah.
I don't know. Are you okay waiting for that long, or?
I mean, we can wait. Again, just my personal opinion. You kind of have a window within which you can introduce change, and the further along we get in the release cycle, the riskier or bumpier that is. So now's a good time to be thinking about that stuff.
Yeah, I don't want to say like let's not discuss stuff. I just want to say like for the sake of the people who are on the previous release team.
Yeah.
To provide input.
And I'm fine with that as well. But I don't think this should stop anybody who's motivated from going through and looking at that doc and putting your name down for a number of items, just to, again, share my screen for those of you who...
There's also only 4 relatively small, minor things that we hadn't yet discussed in the 113 retro.
Right. It's the line is pretty much this. But what I'm looking for, or what I'm interested in, is to see like what we can fill this out with. I especially like the ones that are links to issues, because then I can add those issues to the internet is great here. I could do things like adding those issues to the release milestone to track what's going on, which brings me to one of my suggestions. I don't know how many people know that we had projects that corresponded to different Kubernetes releases. That's how previous release teams tried tracking it. I'm personally not a massive fan of project boards, just because they're not incredibly automation friendly at the moment. But I am a huge fan of using milestones, because I can issue GitHub queries for those. So I'm using a 114 milestone to track everything that needs to be done as part of the V114 release. So I figure things that we want to implement to improve the release are probably sig release related issues that we can put in here, so the release team knows this is what we're focusing on. So some of my personal things are like, let's figure out what code slush means, or if it's even useful at all. Let's talk about this right now, in fact. For those of you who have been around for previous releases, has code slush been useful?
I think it's mainly useful as a, oh, by the way, code freeze is coming.
Yeah, I agree. That's been my experience
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, in my experience, it's kind of tries to solidify and drive up the seriousness a little bit, so that come code freeze, people are not scrambling at that week.
I don't have like strong evidence that I could point to in GitHub, but I feel like I've had the sense that SIG leadership does use it as a way of saying like, hey, this thing doesn't quite look ready. Like we're at code freeze now. Were we at code freeze now, we would probably say no, and we only have a couple of days since we're in the slush period. Like it feels almost like a pre-forcing function. And I think I've seen SIG leadership use that to do some risk assessment on things, because there is the risk that, oh, code freeze is coming, let's put this in, and then sure, maybe it's buggy, whatever, we rush it in, but then during code freeze we can fix bugs. So I get the rationale to that, but I don't know, it's certainly not formally documented, and this is one of the things that I semi-deliberately in my SIG release presentations over the last year, I've talked about the way the cycle progresses, and I kind of hand wave around code slush, and I was hoping that somebody at some point would push back and be like, no, hand waving, there's a solid thing here, it means this. And nobody's ever sort of offered up that. So if nothing else, I like the idea of whether we make it go away, like really saying like, what are the concrete criteria that apply here? Because there aren't.
Yeah, so in terms of objective criteria, the closest thing we have might be the set of labels that are necessary for something to get merged during code slush, which, okay, you have to say your thing has a certain priority, and you now have to say that it's part of the milestone, which is something only a select group of people can add. So it gives it some additional level of scrutiny. But I think there are some people who feel like, oh, great, just more labels. It's Kubernetes. They like to use labels for everything. Wait, which week is it? Which set of labels do I have to use? In terms of pros, there's a file called code slush that lives in the ephemera directory of sig-release. Ephemera is documented as a place that's supposed to be short-lived. Its short life has been about 18 months, give or take now, which feels like 6 releases, I think, in Kubernetes release parlance. That doesn't seem like super short-lived to me. So one of the other issues I have is to maybe like clean that out, and I assigned a couple different people whose roles it seems like this overlaps with. But the code slush thing here talks about how during this period, new features or large refactors might be turned away. So this seems to be kind of a gate that says, if you're trying to land something huge and you haven't landed it by now, don't bother. So one thought I had was you could just get rid of code slush entirely and move code freeze up sooner so that people would be aware.
I think you could more or less replace code slush with just any sort of official release team warning that code freeze is coming.
Right.
Even if it were just like emailing all the mailing list a Game of Thrones meme, something to let them know that like it's coming.
I feel like nobody sees that where people do interact. Like even, I hear Aaron like I totally agree. Like, oh, you're just making me do labels. But when the labels aren't there, then the person does have to pause and think, and that's an active action on their part as opposed to us hoping that somebody gets an email.
Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah, so I have weird feelings about that too, because there are requirements that we note in membership around being on mailing lists. If you're going to be on a mailing list, you should be watching the mail on the mailing list. If you're going to join Milestone Burndown, if you're going to join sig-release, things like that, you should be watching the mail. I think it's enough to notify there, and do that a few times. Aaron's making faces.
I don't know. Like his history has taught me that people don't read. And there's a class of contributor who's only interested in shoving code into the project. And I don't want to dissuade them from doing that because they're highly productive people. And so you could argue that making sure that there's information communicated down at that level is a helpful, redundant reminder of where we are in the release lifecycle. But Ben is just having such a tough time.
Hypothetically, if such a thing were a meme, it could get reposted through all the usual channels and people would actually look at it because it was not a thing to read. I think a lot of people do catch this through things like SIG Slacks and Twitter and stuff. I'll see some of the more active SIGs will themselves reiterate the warning that, like, by the way, we're entering this phase.
Yes. Okay. Aish.
So mostly what it at least helped us do is a lot of people, when we went to them and say, hey, this is not ready for this release, they would say, oh, we'll see until slush. And then they'll kind of back off or not try to get it in if they're not done by slush. So my only thing is it could be called anything, but if we remove that 1 week, that will become code freeze. They'll be like, oh, they'll slip into code freeze to get their things in versus like back things out a week early.
Okay.
That's the only advantage I've seen.
So it doesn't go in at that point. We've got to be more firm about this stuff.
Yeah, they kind of expect us to be more firm. They're more receptive to that feedback once they're in slush versus before slush.
Okay. That to me sounds like it's a communications issue, and memes are great for communication. It's shocking that Ben would talk about using memes or emojis to communicate something. So that sounds like a good idea to me. That might be less work for test infra, and it might simplify at least some parts of the process. Let's see.
This is Natasha. We can tweet it out from the Kubernetes handle, and a lot of everybody, follows that handle. So whenever the meme's ready, just please send it my way.
Yes, that is a phrase that I just loved hearing out loud. Okay, there was one other issue I thought was maybe worth discussing with the group, which was revisiting the release tracking issues. So again, I'll share my screen. I don't know how many of you live in the sig-release repo on a daily basis, but if I click through to the issues thing just to roughly see what our workload is like, there are a lot of these release tracking issues that are listed as stage stable, and some of them are in milestones, but some of them aren't, and they're all created by this k8s-release robot, and they don't seem to actually have too much human interaction. In fact, if I go back to the query just to see like what these are, like there's really almost nothing. They age out.
They age out. So we should get rid of them. I don't know what process is creating this right now. It might be part of the release tooling, but we should get rid of them.
I think it's part of building a release. I used to see this every time Doug did created one.
Right. I think it's some part of, I tried grepping in the Kubernetes release repo, and I saw mention of k8s-release robot, but I still haven't found the code that actually creates the issue. So I still lack some context. One thing I did want to point to, though, let's see here. Back in the 1.9 days, oh boy, this is going to be kind of rough. Bear with me here. Back when I was part of the 1.9 release team, I think I was bug triage then, we used releases to signify we used issues to signify we want to cut this release. And so we'd say, we're going to cut it on this date. And then we could link issues or pull requests back to this issue to say like, hey, this given test here is preventing us from cutting this build of the release. And I personally found it kind of useful. You also had like an ongoing place to have like an ongoing discussion about the status of a given build of Kubernetes, separate and apart from the sig-release channel. But as far as I can tell, this was never used again after 1.9. I haven't actually gone back into the retro to see like if people felt that it was too much friction. But it's something I'll put out there as an idea to use for the 1.14 release. All right. I'm not hearing strong opinions either way.
I mean, I feel like any discussion that happens could more easily happen on Slack, as long as the decision is documented somewhere afterwards. If that's active conversation, I think there's some friction in GitHub notifications.
Yeah, GitHub notifications are never a useful thing for me, but it was useful to link issues together. But I may have been the only person that was useful for, and I think there are better ways of tracking stuff. Okay.
What are your suggestions on better ways? I've kind of liked the GitHub buckets for things like that because they're visible, and I do have a worry about the various spreadsheets and Google Docs that end up kind of ephemerally coming into existence during the release to do some of that similar tracking, but those aren't visible beyond the team either.
When you say GitHub buckets, what do you mean?
An issue that sort of tracks a set of things and allows that interlinking, like the ones you pulled up.
Yeah, having umbrella issues.
Umbrella issue, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, here's the thing: if y'all feel like we should use it, then fine, use it. But the fact that it hasn't been used over the last few cycles kind of signals its usefulness.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and check the retro to see like whether it was just something that was dropped or what. But I agree, that's a signal. In the vein of what else would I suggest?
Sorry, I have a quick question about the umbrella issue. What is the difference between such an umbrella issue for a version versus the milestone? Or what is better? Is the milestone better? Is a issue better? Or do we need both? Or do we want to have both?
So I like the milestone in that it aggregates like these common GitHub issue types, as opposed to, I mean, there's also something to be said for the umbrella issue, which aggregates all of that stuff in one issue. I think it depends on who's using it and what it's used for. I don't find any current usefulness in what's being put out by that bot. Like if we want to tweak it, we need to figure out how. And I'll leave that as an exercise to y'all. But I don't think looking at it is particularly useful right now.
Yeah, like I said, how I might use preemptive issues rather than issues that are created after a release is cut is to link GitHub issues or pull requests that could potentially be blocking a given release from being cut. And I feel that would be more useful than a milestone because it would give me a place to focus discussion. And it would be, we currently scope milestones to the entire quarter-long release, whereas those issues, at least when I use them on the 1.9 release lifecycle, we use them for every alpha and beta and RC thing that we cut, which may be worth keeping in mind, as I know one of the things that I've heard discussion about is some folks from SIG cluster lifecycle who are motivated to make sure that Debian.deb and .rpm files are cut for every alpha and beta release, not just the final thing. So it could be, we would want to progressively see like improvements on how that's done for each milestone. So it's something to mull over. I'm not super sold on it either. Like I do agree that if it's not something that just organically was carried forward, that could be a sign that it was too much friction to organically happen. Could be that nobody realized that was there as an option. The other thing I'll throw out there is I do keep trying to give as much credit as I can to Zach Arnold and his nice little Airtable integration So I put together a doc, a link to the meeting notes where I'm just trying to, like, when I have time, play around with it, or play around with the idea of integrating between GitHub and Airtable in general. So, hey, should be world commentable. Why not just having something dump into Google Sheets, since we already live in a world where most everything is in Google Sheets? I don't have a great answer for that. I think it feels to me like maybe Google Sheets API isn't as, like, friendly. In the similar usage is Signal thing, like the fact that somebody from the community was able to just quickly hack something together seems to tell me that the API might be easier to use. So Zach's thing is a Node.js app that's deployed to serverless.com. It would be cool to see somebody take that and turn it into a Kubernetes thing. Another option might be Jesse Frizzell wrote something called Gettable, whatever, that's Golang based. I hacked around with that for a little bit to the point where I could manually copy paste some issue references here, run the bot a couple times, and then I could get this nice, like, spreadsheet looking thing that had the different labels and stuff. And so you could maybe visualize eventually how, like, I could, you know, my dream that I have documented here is, like, give me a GitHub query, like everything that's in the Kubernetes org that has label area conformance, and then maybe have something that knows how to parse and understand the area kind and priority labels and, like, put those into their own column. And then you can do, like, cool stuff by, like, let's group everything by author in this thing. And so you can see this particular view, Jay Burkus opened these 3 issues. I could group by other things. So I don't know. I'm playing around with it. If there's somebody who wants to also play around on it, feel free to ping me. This seems like kind of a neat thing. But I'm more interested in having a conversation with my enhancements lead to understand how she would best like to track enhancements, starting from there, and then see how bug triage would like to track issues, and see how CI Signal would like to track bug flakes, and see if, you know, it makes sense to have one way to rule them all, or if each person has sort of their own best practices. I'm going to try and do less monologuing next time, I swear. So that's pretty much all that I wanted to, oh wait, I had one other thing that I would actually appreciate leads taking a look at. I tried to create a document based on a template because as I jump from thing to thing, it's really super easy if I can just copy paste something with a bunch of to-dos and then fill out the to-dos until it's done. So I figured for our weekly meetings, I could take this thing that's at the bottom of the meeting minutes, and just copy paste that and say, okay, this is going to be, you know, the next one's going to be week 1, and then who's going to be the host, who's going to be the note taker, and then give a section for each of the different roles to provide, like, some kind of weekly metrics for how their thing is going. So, like, the enhancements person could say, well, here's the number of enhancements that I see this week for 114. And if we're really trying to drill in on the KEP thing, like, here's the number of enhancements that have a KEP associated with them or don't have a KEP associated with them. Maybe CI Signal wants to tell us about the number of release blocking jobs that are failing, or maybe the number of test issues that they're tracking. Just some kind of 1 to 2 numbers. If you ever listen to the Planet Money podcast, the indicator, the like, just some random number that you can show each week so we can sort of see how things are changing over time. It's a good habit to build up now as we start to get to burn down, where, like, burn down by its very name kind of indicates that we're going to be looking to burn some numbers that start high and start high and go down low. And so what are those numbers that we want to start high and go down low that we start tracking now so we get used to tracking them on a more frequent basis? So that template down there was just my guess at some metrics that might be useful. I have no idea how easy some of these numbers are to produce, so it's not like it is a mandate, but I would appreciate the different folks taking a look at that and seeing what makes sense to them. Okay.
Hey, this is Natasha. I had a quick question. I went into 1.14 on GitHub and there was no timeline. When will you upload the timeline for the whole release?
I plan on getting to that later today.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, cool. I guess we're going to call that our week 1 release team meeting. Thank you everybody for your time, and I look forward to seeing you all on Slack. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Bye.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.